lifted the sheet and read my salary out loud. $95,000. He dragged out each word, letting it hang there like a dirty secret, then smiled that corporate smile and added, "For someone who's, let's say, past their prime, I'm Ryan Martinez, 49 years old, and I've been working my tail off in sales for 18 years. Former Navy, divorced dad, trying to keep my teenage daughter Emily's college fund intact." That particular Tuesday morning started like any other weekly team sync, but Scott Phillips had different plans. The conference room was packed, cameras on for remote folks, everyone else crammed around the table. A couple people laughed when he said it. That nervous laugh you do when you don't know where to look. Someone on the video call went perfectly still, their little square frozen like they'd stopped breathing. My face heated up, but my hand stayed flat on the table. Navy taught me to stay calm under fire, even when the fire's coming from your own command. For weeks before that meeting, Scott had been making little comments that sounded like jokes until you were the target. "Must be nice to cruise on old habits," he'd say when I closed a deal using relationships I'd built over nearly 2 decades. "Some of us need to stay current," he'd add, like my methods were museum pieces. Scott was 42, our regional VP with an MBA from some fancy school he mentioned every chance he got. The kind of guy who used words like synergy and pivot in normal conversation. He'd been pushing this workforce optimization thing for months, talking about bringing in digital natives and refreshing the team dynamic. Translation: get rid of the older guys like me. 2 senior guys had quietly left the company in the past month. Every time someone disappeared, Scott would clap his hands and call it streamlining for the future. The message was clear. If you had gray hair and cost more than he could control, you were a problem waiting to be solved. I kept my head down because my numbers were solid. In 18 years, I'd built a client base that trusted me. My renewal rate was 94%, highest on the floor. In a business where relationships matter, that should count for something. I figured performance would protect me. Wrong. We were 10 minutes into our weekly meeting when Scott slid that paper across the table like he was dealing cards. He didn't look at the agenda. He didn't mention quarterly goals. He looked straight at me with that smirk and said, "Since we're talking about optimization today, let's discuss what it costs to keep some people around." That's when he read my salary. Then he paused, let it sink in, and delivered the knockout. For someone past their prime. Then Scott tilted his head like he was being reasonable. "Ryan, help us understand. Why should we pay that kind of money for old-school methods when we could hire 2 fresh graduates for the same cost?" The room went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I didn't raise my voice, didn't insult him. I said one sentence, calm and factual. My clients renewed $2.3 million worth of contracts last quarter, and my track record over 18 years speaks for itself. The silence got heavier. You could feel the tension. Scott pushed his chair back and stood up. He walked behind me slow, close enough that I could smell his expensive coffee, and whatever cologne he thought made him look like leadership. He leaned down toward my shoulder and said quietly, "Don't correct me in front of the team, soldier boy." I started to turn my head. That's when his hand snapped across my face. It wasn't a stumble. It wasn't an accident. It was sharp and deliberate, like he'd been planning it. My chair rocked. Someone gasped. A pen clattered to the floor. Before I could process what just happened, the conference room door opened. Jennifer Walsh from HR walked in with a clipboard, looking like she'd been waiting in the hallway for her cue. Behind her was Kevin Stone from security, badge reader already in hand. Jennifer's eyes flicked to my cheek, then to Scott, then back to me. "Everyone, please return to your desks. We need the room." Scott's expression shifted fast. Anger to confusion to that smile he used on executives. "This is ridiculous," he said, backing toward the door. He got aggressive. I was de-escalating. Jennifer didn't argue. She just pointed to a chair in the corner. "Ryan, please sit. We'll take statements." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a surprise to them. This was procedure. I sat because my legs weren't steady. My cheek pulsed hot. Kevin stood by the door, not looking at me, just watching Scott like he was tracking a threat level. Jennifer opened a folder that already had labels on it: my department, Scott's name, and a blank line where my name would go. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked. I stared at that folder and heard my own voice come out calmer than I felt. He disclosed my compensation in front of the team. He called me past my prime. I defended my track. I defended. Record. Then he hit me. Jennifer's pen moved. No reaction. No, "Are you okay?" "Not yet." "And before that," she said, "was there any disagreement? Any raised voices?" Scott let out a laugh that sounded like a cough. "I was trying to coach him on accepting feedback. He's been difficult for weeks." I looked at Scott and realized he was already building the version of me he needed. So I started building mine too. "I have the meeting agenda," I said. "I can tell you exactly what I said, word for word. And there are witnesses, everyone in this room." Jennifer nodded like that was a box to check. "We'll speak with each witness individually." Kevin cleared his throat. "Scott, please step outside with me." Scott raised his hands in fake innocence. "Fine, but I want it on record. I felt threatened." They left. The door shut. For the first time in 18 years, I was alone in a room with HR, and the silence felt heavier than the hit. Jennifer set her pen down and finally looked at my face like a person, not a case. "File. Do you need medical attention?" "I need you to tell me why you were already outside the door," I said. Her eyes didn't blink. "I'm not sure what you mean. You didn't walk in surprised. You walked in on schedule." Her mouth tightened for a second, then smoothed back into policy mode. "We received a report of a potential disturbance." A disturbance. In a closed meeting that he was running. She didn't explain that. Instead, she slid a form toward me. "This is an incident statement. Write what happened in your own words." I picked up the paper. At the top, it said "Workplace Conduct Event," and underneath, pre-filled, was the timestamp of our meeting. Someone had reported it before his hand ever touched my face. My phone buzzed, then again, then again. I pulled it out and saw what made my stomach drop. My access to the client dashboard was gone. My own accounts locked out while I was still sitting in that conference room. "Someone's in my systems," I said. Jennifer's hand paused over her clipboard. "That may be temporary while we review. That's retaliation, and it's happening right now." Through the glass wall, I could see Scott in the hallway on his phone, smiling like he'd already won. That's when I stopped thinking like an employee hoping things would be fair. I started thinking like someone who needed to protect himself and his daughter's future. What happened after wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching them try to make it sound mutual. Jennifer kept her voice soft, like she was trying to lower the temperature. "I'm going to ask you a few questions, then we'll decide next steps. She didn't say he assaulted you. She said incident like it was weather." I looked at my phone again. Error messages everywhere. My client dashboard gone. My calendar loading slowly like it was being stripped away piece by piece. "Your access may be temporarily restricted while we review," Jennifer said carefully. "That's standard. It happened while I was still in the room," I said. "That's not standard. That's someone hitting buttons in real time." She didn't answer, just slid the statement form closer. Write the sequence of events in your own words. I could feel my cheek throbbing. The temptation to write angry was strong, but I'd been around long enough to know feelings don't survive investigations. Facts do, so I wrote it like a military report. Scott displayed confidential compensation information. He read my salary aloud. He made ageist comments. He demanded justification. I responded with performance data. He approached me, issued a verbal threat about military service, and struck me with an open hand. The meeting had witnesses both in person and remote. I wrote the names I could remember. Jennifer watched my pen move like she was watching a timer count down. When I finished, she scanned it without expression. Did you do anything that could be perceived as aggressive? Raise your voice? Stand up? Move toward him? There it was. The part where the story becomes both sides. No, I said. I stayed seated. I spoke one sentence about my performance. You can confirm that with witnesses. And prior to today, have there been conflicts between you two? I let out a breath slowly. He's been making comments about my age and methods for weeks. That's not conflict. That's targeting. And today, he had a printed document ready. This wasn't spontaneous. Do you know how he obtained that document? That question hit me in the gut. It wasn't just about him being cruel. It was about a data breach. I don't, I said. But I know compensation records aren't his to share. Through the glass, I watched Kevin escort Scott down the hall. Scott looked relaxed now. Not shaken, not scared. Like a man who'd rehearsed his lines. We'll be speaking with him as well, Jennifer said. While you do that, I said, I need two things documented. I want the incident report number, the official one. And I'm requesting preservation of evidence, security footage, meeting attendance, chat logs, badge access records for my account changes, and any documents used to get my compensation details. Jennifer's face tightened. We follow standard retention procedures. I'm not asking about standard. I'm making a formal preservation request. She stared at me, weighing something. Then she wrote at the top of her notes. Understood. My phone buzzed with a message from Michelle Torres, one of my teammates. Are you okay? Scott's telling people you got in his face. My jaw clenched. He wasn't just defending himself. He was recruiting witnesses to remember it his way. I typed back, I'm fine. Don't discuss details yet. If anyone asks, tell them to talk to HR. Then I tried to check my email and got an authentication error. My access was disappearing in real time. I can't get into my email, I said, holding up the phone. My client systems were cut during the incident. Jennifer's tone stayed level, but lost warmth. I'll contact IT. In writing, I said. Include the time the restrictions were placed, because timing matters. That got her attention. She stood, opened the door, spoke quietly to Kevin. He nodded and left. I'm also going to ask if you need medical attention, she said when she sat back down. I do, and I'm going to get it. But first I want to understand something. You said you received a report of a disturbance. Who reported it? I can't share the identity of the reporting party. So, you were contacted before the assault, I said, keeping my voice even. You were positioned outside at exactly the right moment. She didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. We responded as quickly as possible. That told me enough. Scott had set it up. Either he warned HR I was volatile, or he told them he was planning a difficult conversation. Either way, he made sure the company's first instinct would be damage control, not justice. Kevin returned with a small card. Case reference number, he said. You'll get an email when we restore limited access. Jennifer looked at me. We're placing you on paid administrative leave while we investigate. You're instructed not to contact team members about the incident. Paid leave, clean packaging for getting me out of the way. If I'm on leave, I said, my accounts need protection from any changes made to cover this up. I want it documented that nothing gets deleted or modified, and I want an audit trail of anything touched after this moment." Jennifer wrote faster this time. "Okay." I stood slowly. "I'm going to urgent care, and I want written confirmation of the leave terms, evidence preservation, and case reference before end of day. You'll receive it." I walked out with Kevin beside me, past co-workers who pretended not to stare. Scott's office door was closed, but I could hear his voice through the wall, laughing like the joke had landed perfectly. In the lobby, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Michelle. It was an automated notification. "Your access has been updated. Manager approval granted." Scott wasn't just trying to survive, wasn't this. He was still reaching for control. That night, I stopped being the guy who waited for fairness. Urgent care smelled like disinfectant and worry. I sat under fluorescent lights while a nurse asked me to rate my pain. When I told her it happened at work, her tone changed. Everyone knows what documentation means. The doctor was professional, checked my pupils, asked about dizziness, documented exactly what he saw. Facial contusion consistent with blunt force trauma. He printed the visit summary and told me to keep it. I drove home with that paper on the passenger seat, like evidence in a trial I hadn't agreed to join. Emily looked up from her homework when I walked in. "Dad, what happened to your face?" I told her I bumped into something. The lie tasted metallic. In the bathroom, I saw the mark clearly for the first time, a dark bruise spreading under my eye. I took photos from 3 angles, date and time showing, then backed them up to my personal cloud. Not because I wanted drama, because companies forget faster than bruises heal. My phone kept buzzing with access alerts. Each one was corporate language, permissions updated, role reassigned, but together they spelled out a message. While I was documenting an assault, someone was erasing my footprint. I didn't call anyone. Didn't vent to friends. I opened my laptop and tried the employee portal. The login wheel spun until it kicked me out. Limited access, just like Kevin promised. So I documented that too. Screenshots of every notification. Exact times. A simple list of what I could access yesterday versus today. In a normal investigation, access changes happen after decisions. These were happening during the chaos, like someone cleaning a scene. Jennifer's email came near midnight. Paid administrative leave. No team contact. Investigation ongoing. She attached the case reference and 2 paragraphs of polished neutrality that made my skin crawl. She didn't write "your manager assaulted you." She wrote an "incident occurred." If they controlled the language, they'd control the outcome. So I started naming things myself. I wrote my own timeline while the details were sharp. The exact moment he read my salary. The exact words I said, the angle of his hand. How the room sounded when it went quiet. I listed everyone present, where they sat, who was remote. I even noted who laughed, not to punish them, but because social pressure matters when stories start changing. Then I focused on the real problem. How did Scott get my compensation record? That information sat behind HR systems with role-based access and audit trails. Managers could see ranges during annual planning, maybe. Most couldn't see exact figures, and we had policies about confidential personnel information buried in the employee handbook. The printed paper bothered me most. Not a screenshot, not something overheard. Printed meant someone pulled a report or forwarded a document. That doesn't happen by accident. I called an employment attorney the next morning. Not for revenge, for survival. She listened without interrupting, then asked 3 questions that cut through everything. Do you have medical documentation? Yes. Do you have witnesses? Yes. Do you have proof of retaliation? I had access logs changing in real time. Then she asked the 4th question. Do you have proof of how he accessed your compensation? Not yet. Her advice was direct. Don't resign. Don't meet alone with anyone. Keep everything in writing. Ask for evidence preservation again, formally. She told me something else. Companies can't control what employees discuss about pay, but they can punish managers who weaponize confidential records. Focus on what you can prove. Violence, procedure, retaliation, documentation. Before sending anything, I read Jennifer's message like a contract. The language was careful, but it had one weakness. It implied good faith investigation. If they were acting in good faith, they shouldn't mind preserving evidence. I wrote back clearly, thanked her for the reference number, confirmed I was seeking medical care, and attached the visit summary. I requested again that security footage, meeting records, platform logs, and badge access trails be preserved. I asked for the audit trail on my account permissions, who changed what, when, under whose authority. I requested my client notes be placed under legal hold. Then I added the line I didn't want to write, but needed to. Please confirm how my confidential compensation was accessed and why it was disclosed in a team meeting. I hit send. Hours of silence, the kind that means lawyers are talking. Then my phone rang from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Jennifer emailed again. Shorter, colder. We have scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss next steps. Under required attendees, Scott Phillips. They wanted me in a room with him to smooth things over, split blame, move on. They wanted a clean ending. I forwarded the invite to my attorney and replied to HR with one sentence. I will attend. Please confirm legal and security will be present and that the meeting will be documented. If they wanted a room, I'd make sure it had the right witnesses. The next week moved strangely. Slow days, sharp moments. Legal interviewed me by phone with a court reporter on the line. I told the story the same way, same sequence. I refused to guess at things I couldn't prove. I refused to exaggerate. I didn't call Scott a monster. I called him a manager who disclosed confidential compensation, made ageist comments, issued threats, then assaulted me in a workplace meeting. I gave names, timestamps, facts. When they asked about my salary being read aloud, the legal rep paused. You did not authorize disclosure of that information? No. And it was used to humiliate me, not discuss compensation planning. Silence. The kind that means they know the difference. They interviewed witnesses next. My phone started lighting up with messages from co-workers who didn't know what to say. Michelle texted, "He told us you lunged." That's not what I saw. You didn't even stand up. Another co-worker wrote, HR asked if you were aggressive. I told them the only aggressive person was Scott. Then came the message that hit hardest because it was so small and human. A junior analyst emailed, I'm sorry I laughed. I didn't understand what he was doing. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing them, because I knew investigations twist contact into coordination. I let the paper trail speak. On the fourth day, my access came back fully. The confirmation email noted changes had been initiated under manager credentials during the incident window and adjusted multiple times over the following hours. That wording was careful, but enough. It proved what happened wasn't automatic protocol. It was human decision. On the fifth day, legal called again. Security reviewed footage. It confirms you remained seated when physical contact occurred. I closed my eyes and let that sink in. Not because I needed vindication, because I needed protection from his story. And the compensation document? A pause. We confirmed the report was printed from an HR terminal. We're investigating access and authorization. Someone in HR space had pulled it. Pressure, carelessness, or complicity. Couldn't tell yet. But it was real and traceable. 2 days later, Jennifer sent the first honest message I'd received. Scott has been placed on investigatory leave. You will no longer report to him. Effective immediately. Not pending. Immediately. Then for the first time, she wrote without corporate cotton. We understand you experienced harm at work, and we take that seriously. I read it 3 times. Not an apology, but a shift. The company realizing the file was no longer containable. When I saw Scott's name on that meeting invite, my first instinct was to cancel. Not because I was scared, because I knew what they were planning. Turn a clear violation into a messy misunderstanding. Spread blame until nobody was responsible. I didn't cancel. I showed up early, dressed like I was presenting to the board. They chose a different conference room. Smaller, no windows, no glass walls, no audience. Jennifer was there with another HR woman I hadn't met. Kevin from security. A legal rep who gave only his first name, Paul, like last names were liabilities. Scott wasn't there yet. Jennifer started predictably. We're here to discuss next steps and ensure a safe workplace for everyone. Everyone, I repeated, keeping my voice flat. Paul nodded politely. We want to understand what happened and resolve this appropriately. I slid a folder onto the table. Timeline, medical summary, photos, screenshots with timestamps, witness list, preservation request, everything printed and organized. Nobody touched it. They just stared like it was heavier than paper. Before we begin, Jennifer asked, "Do you feel safe participating?" "I'll feel safe when you stop trying to put me in rooms with him," I said. "You invited him." The other HR woman kept her tone soft. He requested to attend. Did I request to be assaulted? First crack. Paul shifted. Kevin's jaw tightened. Just to be clear, I continued, my access was cut while I was sitting with HR. That's not cooling off. That's retaliation. The door clicked before anyone could respond. Scott walked in like he owned the building. Clean shirt, calm face, that confident smile he wore when he thought he'd managed the outcome. He didn't look at my bruise. He looked at Paul. Thanks for making time, then glanced at me like I was the inconvenience. Sorry things got dramatic. I didn't mean for it to escalate. I didn't respond. I watched HR to see if anyone would stop him. Nobody did. Scott, please take a seat, Jennifer said. Scott sat, leaned back, folded his hands. This is being blown out of proportion. He got aggressive. I put my hand up in self-defense. I turned to Kevin. You reviewed the footage? Kevin didn't look at Scott. Not yet. Why not? Paul cut in smoothly. We're reviewing all relevant materials. Good, I said, because the platform logs will show I never stood up, and the room camera will show he approached me. Scott scoffed. You were disrespectful about feedback. I stated performance facts. You can confirm the exact words with witnesses. The other HR woman lifted her hand. Let's focus on moving forward professionally. There it was again. Move forward. Corporate speak for let's skip accountability. I'm going to read my timeline, I said, opening the folder. I'll keep it short. Scott's smile tightened. Jennifer's eyes dropped to her notes. I read it clean and clinical. What he disclosed, what he said, what I said, what he did, when HR entered, when my access changed. No emotions, just sequence. When I finished, I slid the photos to Paul. Do you want the medical record now, or after you tell me why my confidential compensation was printed and read out loud? Scott's posture shifted like a mask slipping. It wasn't confidential. Managers have access. During planning cycles, I said. They don't have the right to weaponize it in team meetings. Jennifer finally spoke. The company doesn't condone sharing confidential information. Then explain the printout. Explain the paper. Explain the timing. Scott looked at Jennifer like he expected rescue. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed on her notes. Paul asked carefully, "Scott, how did you obtain the document referenced in the meeting?" Scott shrugged. "It was in the planning packet." "Which packet?" "The compensation planning packet." "We all got it." The other HR woman shook her head slightly. "That packet isn't distributed to all managers." Scott's face hardened. "Then someone sent it to me." "Who?" Paul pressed. "I don't remember." Kevin's phone buzzed. He checked it, looked up. It just confirmed the access changes to Ryan's accounts were initiated under Scott's manager credentials. Timestamped during the incident window. Silence. Scott sat forward. "That's impossible. I was in a meeting." "You were," I said, "with my salary in your hand." "He's setting me up," Scott pointed at me. "Then you should be excited there are logs," I said. Paul's voice changed. Still calm, but colder. "Scott, did you direct any access changes during or after the incident?" Scott looked around the room like he was searching for an exit. "I requested limited access for safety." "Whose safety?" I asked. The other HR woman leaned in. "Did you instruct anyone on your team to restrict his access?" "I told my lead to secure the accounts. He's volatile." There it was. The setup. The story he'd planted. I didn't argue with volatile. I put it next to facts. I requested evidence preservation. I went to urgent care. I didn't contact the team. I didn't threaten anyone. Yet my access was pulled while I was still reporting the assault. Jennifer finally looked at Scott. "Did you report a disturbance before the meeting escalated?" Scott blinked. Kevin cut in quietly. HR was positioned outside the room before any physical contact occurred. Confirmed by badge timestamps. Scott's mouth opened, closed. His confidence drained, replaced by irritation because the room was no longer his audience. Paul pushed back from the table. "Scott, I'm going to ask you to step out with security." Scott stood abruptly. "Are you kidding me?" "He's the problem here." "Now," Kevin said. It wasn't a request. Scott turned to Jennifer, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe HR wasn't saving him. Nobody moved. Scott left. The door shut. The air felt lighter and uglier at the same time. Jennifer exhaled, looked at me. For the first time, she didn't sound like a script. "You will not be required to be in the same room with him again." I nodded. "Good." Paul tapped my folder. "We're placing him on leave pending investigation. We're also reviewing the compensation document access and system changes." I stared at him. "And my accounts?" Kevin answered. "Being restored. Any changes made since the incident will be audited." That was the first moment in days my chest loosened. The other HR woman added quietly, "There's one more thing." She slid a new paper across the table. "We pulled the print audit. The compensation report was exported from a shared HR terminal the morning of the meeting." I didn't speak, just felt the pieces clicking. Scott hadn't just crossed lines. He'd dragged someone else in. And whoever helped him was about to learn this wasn't a joke anymore. The following week, they brought me in to meet the division head and legal. Neutral room, glass of water, box of tissues that felt insulting. The division head, a man who'd never remembered my name before, looked tired. I want to start by saying this should never have happened. He wasn't saying it because he cared about me. He was saying it because the company had seen what it looked like from outside. Paul slid a document across. "This outlines corrective actions. Scott was terminated for cause. Workplace violence, misuse of confidential information, policy violations related to access control. Security documented the incident as confirmed assault. They weren't calling it a disturbance anymore. No contact directive became permanent. My reporting line changed that day. My accounts were returned, and a separate team reviewed every modification during the access window. We're covering your medical costs and providing additional compensation as part of resolution, Paul said. The terms were on paper, clean and formal, with non-retaliation clauses. The company needed it more than I did. I read every line slowly. When I finished, I looked up. I'm not signing anything that prevents me from reporting workplace violence to law enforcement. Paul nodded carefully. Nothing limits your legal rights. I went back to work the next Monday. New manager, new floor, same building, but it felt different. Like the walls had learned what recorded voices sound like. People avoided my eyes for the first hour. Then Michelle stopped, with coffee without a word. Other coworkers gave tight nods. The junior analyst didn't say anything, but she didn't laugh at anyone's jokes that day either. At lunch, my new manager asked if I wanted to talk about it. No, I said. I want to work, and I want the work to be normal again. He nodded and didn't push. That felt more like respect than any HR memo. 3 weeks later, I saw Scott's name in an industry newsletter. Not a promotion, not a new role. A short line about a manager departing following an internal investigation. No details, no drama, just a quiet obituary for a career that relied on people staying silent. I stared at that line for a long time, then closed the email and went back to my spreadsheet. That evening, Emily asked about the bruise that was finally fading. I told her the truth this time, that someone at work had crossed a line, but it was handled properly. She nodded, understanding more than I'd given her credit for. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, Dad, she said. That takes guts. Emily's college fund is safe. My 18 years of work still matter. The system worked the way it's supposed to when you document everything and refuse to be erased. He read my salary out loud to own the room. In the end, the only number that mattered was one he couldn't control. How many witnesses remembered exactly what he did? And now Emily knows her dad doesn't back down when it counts.